According to all current scientific proof, the world is actually doing way too much in its extraordinarily wasteful efforts, wasting trillions to fight climate change. There is absolutely no experimental proof that humans can do anything to significantly change the climate, possibly other than geoengineering, which, according to governments, has not been actually tried enough to provide valid evidence that it can work on a global scale. While many climate alarmists spuriously claim that the rate of industrial emissions of CO2 correlate perfectly with the rate of global warming, statistical detrending reveals there is actually no correlation. Furthermore, there is no correlation between the rate of industrial emissions of CO2 and the rate in increase in total atmospheric levels of CO2, indicating that the vast majority of increases in CO2 come from natural sources, not humans. We conclude that atmospheric composition specifically in relation to the CO2 concentration is not responsive to the rate of fossil fuel emissions. This finding is a serious weakness in the theory of anthropogenic global warming by way of rising atmospheric CO2 attributed to the use of fossil fuels in the industrial economy, and of the climate action proposition of the UN that reducing fossil fuel emissions will moderate the rate of warming by slowing the rise of atmospheric CO2. The finding also establishes that the climate action project of creating climate-neutral economies, that is economies that have no impact on atmospheric CO2, is unnecessary because the global economy is already climate neutral. Fossil fuel emissions and atmospheric composition. Spurious correlations are common in climate science where many critical relationships that support the fundamentals of anthropogenic global warming, AGW, are found to be based on spurious correlations. Correlation between X and Y in time series data derive from responsiveness of Y to X at the time scale of interest and also from shared long-term trends. These two effects can be separated by detrending both time series. When the trend effect is removed, only the responsiveness of Y to X remains. This is why detrended correlation is a better measure of responsiveness than source data correlation. Detrending eliminates the correlation of rate of atmospheric CO2 increase and rate of fossil fuel CO2 emissions, ocean CO2 levels and fossil fuel CO2 emissions, rate of global warming and rate of CO2 emissions, rate of sea level rise and rate of CO2 emissions, and rate of Arctic sea ice melt and rate of global warming. Spurious correlations in climate science. Every compassionate and intelligent individual who cares about the billions of people currently suffering should be extremely angry that governments are wasting trillions of taxpayer funds on this unproven, actually with lots of evidence that it is false, hypothesis of a future problem of uncertain gravity with untried methods rather than using these funds to address numerous current definite existential problems, such as global poverty, hunger, starvation, infectious and other diseases, pollution and overfishing of our oceans, violence, political persecution, inadequate housing, sanitation, safe drinking water, and energy, etc.